All right, let's get going. Thank you once again for joining us for our webinar today. I've got some great colleagues with me. First, I'm Kyle Gatch. I'm a developer experience engineer at Chromatic and Storybook. I do things like run these webinars. Do you two want to introduce yourselves?
Yes. I'm Michael Arstead. I'm one of the designers at Chromatic. I am the lead product designer for both Chromatic and Storybook currently. So if you have any design stuff, questions, whatever, I'm your person. Um, yeah. Harris?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Gert Hengeveld. I am calling from the Netherlands. I am one of the software engineers on the Storybook team. I'm here to answer any technical questions.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted these two people in particular to join this call because this is the engineer and the designer that built most of what I'm going to show today. And so I thought they'd be excellent to be here to answer questions and kind of provide some insider insights into what we've done here. So yeah, we're going to be covering how you can review agent-built UI with Storybook. And so Storybook for agents, it works really well with agents. We've built tools for referencing component examples, prop types, and documentation, and that helps ensure like quality reuse of the components that you already have. Um, Other tools help agents to write stories that can provide test coverage. Other tools help them run component tests using those stories to verify the work. And then yet more tools make it easier to review the work that was done. And until recently, the only way to use Storybook with agents was through our MCP server. I recognized a lot of names in that chat, and so I know you're familiar with the MCP server. Um, but it did all those things on the previous slide. It forced the agents to reuse components, it taught them how to write stories well, and it let them run component tests to validate their work. But it did have one big problem. It required, there we go. It required a fixed port on a running Storybook. And that had two implications. It meant that you had to remember to start your storybook before you started work with the agent, or else the whole workflow would break. If the agent couldn't find the MCP server, it had no idea what to do. And then second, you couldn't use it with work trees or other like multi-agent setups because that fixed port prevented multiple instances. So if you've been watching our webinars lately, you know that we've been kind of debating, well, should we stick with MCP or these skills sure seem pretty cool? Maybe we should look into that. And I'm here to tell you that at least for now, we've actually settled on skills. And we're first publishing those skills through plugins for Claude Code and Codex. Now these are still experimental, as you can see by the version number there, um, but it does handle both of those issues. It will automatically start Storybook for you using a preview dev server, and it'll handle that port number on your behalf, so it can spin up multiple instances. Um, Now, to start, we only have these plugins, but we are working. In fact, I literally attended a kickoff meeting this morning with Michael here on how we're doing this. But we're going to extract everything that the plugins can do and everything I'm going to show you into standalone skills as well. So the more agent harnesses can use them and not just Claude Code and Codex. So I'll show you how to add the plugins in a second. But first, I want to preview the other part that we'll be demoing today. So going back to how Storybook helps agents, this human sign-off part is where we're going to focus the rest of our demo on. Before we do that, though, a quick appreciation of stories. So I mentioned them a bit ago, and primarily as a means of increasing test coverage, and they certainly do that, but they do a lot more. They're really the perfect primitive for an agent because stories allow them to, all at the same time, work on components in isolation, generate reviewable states for each component, run component tests and accessibility checks against those states, and serve as documentation to inform future work. So just by working within stories, you get all the agent gets all of those things simultaneously. And so it likes to write stories. But stories don't only help agents. We all know the hardest part of front-end dev with agents isn't the coding or the testing or any of that. It's the review. And when you have to check that the work is actually good, well, stories are a really good base for that too. So first we built this feature we call change detection, which is still here. Like we're not replacing it with agentic review that I'll demo in a second. But first we built change detection, which lets you filter your sidebar down to just like new and changed stories. But in our experience, when we tried to use this for like big UI tasks, it still felt too overwhelming. Most of the sidebar would light up with these little blue icons, and it was hard to know where you should start reviewing. And we realized the agent, because it just did all the work that you're reviewing, actually has the perfect context to curate a limited selection of stories to demonstrate the work that it's done. And then you just review that to get kind of the directional idea of where it's going. Of course, you still want to review everything later, but you have other tools for that. This is for like a quick overview. So that became the basis of our next iteration on this review problem, which, as I said, we call agentic review. So it's a new tool that agents can use to generate a like specialized review for you. It doesn't show everything. It just shows what the agent deems most relevant for you to check. It has an all new design that you can see right here. And your full storybook is just a click away. And the thumbnails that you're looking at here aren't images. Those are the real components using stories. So you can interact with them. And you can also click them to look into a little more detail. And then here you have like the toolbar and your add-ons, everything that you'd expect to have within your storybook. And then you can use the arrows you see at the top there to quickly flip story to story so that you can review one right after the other. So I'd love to show you how that all feels in a demo. Okay, I'm hoping you see Claude Code.
We see
Fantastic.
Claude Code.
All right. So I've got a prompt pre-typed here. Actually, I apologize. I forgot to set this up a little bit. So I'm actually going to remove this just so I can show you how it works. I'll be honest, Claude's desktop app is pretty clunky. You're going to see like 4 different ways that it shows plugins and marketplaces and things. But that's what we have to deal with. Okay, so I opened up in Claude Desktop, I opened up the settings and I went to plugins here. And then I'm going to add. And before I can add a plugin, because we're not in the official marketplace yet, we want to make sure things are a little more settled before we do that. So while it's experimental, we actually have our own marketplace. And to do that, you use our repository, which for now is MCP. So storybook.js/MCP. For some reason, that button says sync to add a marketplace. No idea why. Now I have this Storybook marketplace and it has the one plugin. And so I'm going to install that plugin. All right, there we go. So that's how you get set up. Quite a bit easier than the MCP server, which required like running a command line thing or worse, like editing mcp.json in your repository. And then the plugin comes with some skills. So most of what we're going to see, in fact, everything we see today is just going to be under this stories skill that teaches it to write stories, how to run tests, all that is all in that skill. But if this was in a project that didn't have Storybook yet, you can actually start from the plugin and initialize and set up and even upgrade your Storybook project from using this plugin skills. So I'm not going to demo that today. I'm focused on the review flow, but just know that it is possible to even get started with Storybook using this stuff. Okay, so now that we've got our plugin, I've got a prompt here that says replace the View All Restaurants button on the homepage banner. You'll see the app we're using in just a second with a search field and a submit button, which is primary. Submitting that navigates to a new like search page with a query, which filters the existing restaurant's data client side. only work on UI, no backend or API changes. And then I have this ask any questions first because I want it to try to like clarify any details up front so that I could theoretically just leave this. Although since this is a live demo, we're just going to watch it. All right, so I'm going to kick this off. While this is thinking, is the white versus dark mode, is that really bothering anybody? If it is, speak up in the chat, and I'm happy to switch it to dark mode. In the meantime, I'm going to try to find how I can actually see that chat. There we go. I appreciate that. Yes, on my machine, it is my preference. But some people like literally can't see one or the other. And so I just want to make sure. Like I know Ryan Florence of Remix, somewhat famously, cannot use dark mode whatsoever. Okay, seems like light mode's probably fine. So, um, so it looked through my code base. It's kind of doing like a mini plan mode. You could think, okay, here's what I wanted. Uh, so just to make sure this all worked, I ran through it just before the demo and I forgot to clean up my Git. Okay. No, it's not. It's gone now. Okay. So yeah, it found everything that already existed. Here we go. Let me pull in Storybook workflow since I'm creating components and stories. So the first thing it did is it ran our stories skill, which is going to teach it how to use basically everything now works through the Storybook CLI. And so it's teaching it how to use that Storybook CLI. Now it's trying to boot up Storybook using its own dev server. So I didn't have to start up Storybook. It did that. If I wanted to, I could open it in the preview browser here, which I'll go ahead and do just to get things sized correctly. Um, yeah, while this is experimental, we only have it documented in the READMEs. We don't like to document experimental things on the official Storybook documentation because that does imply a level of stability that we're not comfortable with. I do see a question. What if the Storybook is within a different repository than the application and handled by different teams, for example? So in that case, you would stick with the MCP, the MCP server, because you can actually publish that MCP server with Storybook. Chromatic has it built in, and then you can reference that within your project. But that's kind of a different workflow because that's where you're just taking the components in a Storybook and reusing them in, say, an application that may or may not be using Storybook itself. The workflow we're showing here is where I'm doing work within a local Storybook. And so for that, the plugins are kind of the best way to go.
While you're waiting, I'm going to jump in here. I
Yes,
really
please.
like working across work trees and things like that, which means I may have like a need for multiple instances of Storybook on the same repo. Um, and this plugin, which we haven't talked about too much, it'll handle this more gracefully than having to basically hard code a port in and stuff like that. So that's also a really
Yeah,
nice use case for local.
exactly right. Yeah, I tried to get at that in the slides a little bit, but the MCP required that hard-coded port number, which really you had to do some pretty wonky workarounds to get multi-agent flows going, whereas this just works. It allows the agent to manage that port, which is exactly what it needs. Okay. So far it's really just kind of doing the work. Looking to see.
Well, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer to. Steve asked if there's dozens of projects, do you recommend composition or DIY server in the MCP package?
Hmm. Um, so for just the MCP use case, composition is great. And it'll solve all your issues. It was designed to work together with composition. But if composition is also going to be how you're using the storybook, there are some trade-offs with composition, mostly around add-ons. A lot of the add-ons don't work like cross-boundary. So if it's just MCP, composition's the way to go because it's far easier than building your own thing. Okay, so here's an example of a tool that it's used where we give it the ability to discover which stories changed. Now it's looking to see how it should call this run stories tests. And it looks like it, yeah, so it ran it for only the affected stories. And now it's going to do, since it has its own browser, I swear it's only doing this because it likes to show off, but it'll like kind of run through it a little bit. But it is using Storybook to do that and not, it didn't have to spin up the app. So that's nice. All right. So now here's the meat that I wanted to show. It is publishing a review. And so it's summarizing its work. It's figuring out which stories will best demonstrate the work that it's done, and then it's going to hopefully it opens it up in the preview, or at least it'll give us a link. Yeah, there we go. So we've got a review here. This summarizes homepage search, replaces the view all button. It gives us a more detailed summary. So the banner on the homepage now is a search form. So new component, that's great. That navigates to a new /search route. And then it tells me to look at the banner, the search results, and confirm the app flow still reaches the categories page via the header. So this first kind of collection of stories here is the new search results page. It deemed that like most relevant for me to look at. So it's looking pretty good. I can't tell what the results look like, so I might click into that. Okay. Makes sense. And then, so if there's no query, it's just supposed to show all restaurants. Seems like that worked too. Instead of going back, I could use my arrows. So there's the no results. That's great. So this collection's looking pretty good. Then we've got our search form component showing all the various states of this. That component in the banner. So kind of showing me in context. And then this is showing me a interaction where it clicks this all restaurants. Okay, so it's just verifying that nothing broke there. So yeah, I can see pretty good with decent confidence like what it did. I can also see like if I click into this, that alignment sucks. Fix the alignment of the input and button for search for.
Cal, you can even just point it at the element.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the browser supports that.
Uh-huh. Well, now navigated. Okay. Yeah, the one catch with this preview browser is you cannot navigate when it is navigating. You'll confuse the agent. So you just kind of have to let the agent drive while it's working.
Yeah. While we're doing that, I want to answer a question about Tim basically asked, do skills reduce token usage? Uh, I can definitely say yes on this case. Usually, I mean, yes, they take up some tokens too, but having done many attempts at installing Storybook or updating Storybook or adding an add-on by telling an agent to do it, the amount of trouble it causes itself without these skills is well worth the skills. Let me put it that way. Like, it can run itself in circles because it tries to install Storybook by maybe it looks at the docs and it tries to install the packages independently, but the packages are going to be mismatched, or it installs testing on old data while Storybook on new data. Like, it just gets really uh, puts itself into these nice troubleshooting loops that you love to watch as somebody who knows how to actually do stuff. It's torture.
Yeah.
So these
Yeah.
they make a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. It also helps a lot that it can just look up what stories exist in the storybook using the story index, and it doesn't have to go look at the file system to figure out what story files are there. And
Hmm.
even if it does like look up files on the system, then it doesn't know the story identifiers, and then it's still going to guess wrong at what stories might exist in the system. And that's exactly the sort of problem that we fixed by actually having an MCP server that can just talk to your storybook dev server, which is way more token efficient than looking at source code.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious, do you know if, like, relative to the MCP server, there's any tokens savings on skills?
Um, I don't think so. Um,
Yeah, that's my
fundamentally,
understanding as well, is it's kind of a wash.
fundamentally, so the MCP server thing, there's like a workflow prompt that we provide to the agent so that it knows what MCP things to call and when.
Yeah.
And that is still the same, except that it's not wrapped in like a system injected prompt that like lives in your context all the time. Now it's a skill that you invoke. I mean, you still register the main skill, but then it like shells out to different subskills which it only needs at certain times. So that's actually more token efficient in that regard. Um,
Okay.
but it's also still stuff we're still playing around with, like getting that more
Oh,
efficient.
absolutely.
We
Yeah.
are compacting our prompts a lot. In fact, we ran into an issue where there was a limit of 2,000 characters or so in Claude that beyond which it would just no longer process our prompts, and we had like 8,000 characters in prompts, and we didn't even notice because it was just not. It was just ignoring the other 6,000 characters of our prompts. And so we had to compact it down way down to fit in those 2,000 characters. And that's the sort of thing that now we're super aware of. Like, it's one of those learnings when you start to implement this stuff, the things that you learn when you do this, and then you address them. I'm not sure if we're going to get into it, but we now have a whole eval suite around our prompts to automatically test our prompts as well.
Yes. Yeah, I would say the reason this is experimental at the moment is because of the prompt engineering that we still want to do and, like, really apply some rigor to. Um, yeah, Michael, do you want to speak a little bit about that summary question you just answered? I think there could be some interesting insights from a design standpoint, like why we chose to do that.
Yeah, let's talk about this, just how it works in general. Basically, we provided a tool to let the agent show you some stuff. We don't actually care what it shows you as long as they're, stories. But we say like, hey, Claude, show me all the stuff that uses form elements in my storybook, and it'll do that. And to help add context when you come back, with a minute or two later, however long it takes Claude to do it, uh, you have a summary there telling you basically what it found and what it did. And then you have some things broken up for you into these nice collections. So the search form component top bit is a collection, and the summary is just to help you have a little more context. That's really all it's there for.
Yeah.
Because some of these things might happen asynchronously. Like we've all, well, it's pretty common to have a lot of different sessions going at once. You might forget about a session and come back later and want to see like, oh yeah, what was it showing me again? Like the summary is kind of useful in that case.
Yes, totally. Few questions. So somebody noticed the stories had play functions that ran some like assertions, like to be in document, which would be redundant if you're using something like Chromatic to visually test your stories. Totally agree. If you want to save those tokens, yeah, you could just provide some agent instructions in the project to preference, like, hey, don't check the visibility of things using a play function. That's kind of the beauty and the curse of agents is you can steer them that way. Curse because it's not ever perfect. Another really good question. So I didn't mention this, but the component reuse part of what we showed is only supported in React because it requires a manifest format that we've only built out for React so far. And the question is, when is that manifest going to be supported in other frameworks besides just React? The good news is we are kicking off a project to do that right now in the next 6 weeks. So we are building that literally today.
I want to jump on another question too, real quick before we move on. Brian asked, they said, we have a separate repository for our component library with Storybook covering all shared components. These components are used across more than 10 other repositories. Should we also install Storybook in those repositories to document larger composed components built from the shared library? My answer is you definitely should, and there's a lot of wins you can get from doing that. But I think it just makes working on them a lot more efficient from a front end standpoint. You get some testing for free, you get all this stuff for free, and then you also get this ability to search for things, so try things. Yeah, I don't know. I really like the value of composed components, especially across systems. You also don't have to spin up the app to see states.
Yes. I think Martin has a very interesting question where he's saying, okay, I'm starting from an app. It's got components all over. I don't have a component library or design system, but I want one. Is there anything that these tools can do to like help me extract a shared component library from my app? I've personally never tested that, but I imagine probably.
You can almost certainly do that. If you want just like start with a storybook for your app, like you don't have stories for them. One thing that we tried at one point at Chromatic is we deleted all of our stories, and then we had AI regenerate all of our stories for all of our components in the Chromatic source code in the monorepo of Chromatic, and that just worked. Like 85% of stories were great. They just worked. And then there was like a handful of them which had needed some manual interaction to like get mock data right and all that stuff. But yes, if you have an existing application, you don't have to go and manually write stories for them. And then of course, the real question here is, can you like extract like this like a component library or a design system from that? Well, I'd say like let's start with the stories that we have documentation about everything that there is, and then AI can work very efficiently with the stories that you already have to like bucket them, right? Make collections of stuff that of things that belong together. Um, and then from there you can like start to like do some refactors. You don't have to do that all in one go, right? Just start to like group them in a smart way, and you can definitely let AI do that. I mean, what you've seen, for example, in the summary page for the review is that it generates these collections, right? That is also AI generated. It's just like it's taking some smart heuristics, as in like let's start with like our atomic components, such as like buttons or input fields and that sort of thing, and they will we'll do like some bigger modules like a search box or a header, and then we'll get to like full pages, right? So entire screens or pages, or you've got workflows like wizards, that sort of thing. And that's how usually UI is like built up using components. And that's something you can teach your agents. Like just write a skill to like do that. If you want to use atomic design, you can. I'm pretty sure there's probably already a skill out there to do atomic design. So give it a try. See how it works. I think you'll be surprised how great it is.
Steve asked a question earlier about, let's see, this is a chromatic specific question. I'll try to be fast with this one, but basically, uh, when we have a design review in chromatic diffs, and they leave comments, can't find any way to get that in a screenshot into the agent without copying and pasting. Yes, I feel your frustration, but also we're working on it. That's all. I mean, that's the details of it are still being tested, changing, but we're working on it. So hopefully that's not a pain for uh, much
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah, I'll give a little more
Yeah.
feedback or a little
Yeah.
more information.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working on building out an API that agents will have access to do everything that you can do within Chromatic for you, basically. Obviously, it
Right.
won't do the reviewing itself, but it will check test failures. It'll surface those for you. It'll fix accessibility issues that it finds. It will address comments that you leave, all of that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yes. And you can
If you
kind of
are a
configure it
Chromatic,
yourself. Yeah.
yes, yeah. If you are a Chromatic customer, that's actually kind of in a private beta right now. So reach out to your rep and we can get you access.
Yep.
Okay, I've been trying to scroll up the questions just to make sure we hit them all. Um, there's also the Q&A widget if you want to make absolutely sure that your question gets answered.
Let's talk more about this review while you're looking. So
Yeah, sure.
that this agentic review tool has been really useful. I mean, for me, especially when you're doing rapid iteration or you're trying to find something, like I found it to be far more flexible than just the more obvious, like, hey, I need you to tweak some stuff. Show me what you tweaked after you're done, like that kind of thing. That's an obvious workflow, but I've been using the heck out of it for other things. Like, hey, um, show me all of our form buttons across this mature code base that has maybe some duplicates, maybe some stuff we've missed. And then go through and find that and show me a good swath of those things like that. And a really useful tool. Access to the API. You'll have
Yeah,
to reach out to
I
your
was
rep.
typing that
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Yeah, Michael, that's a great point. I only showed it in a workflow where like the agent kind of on its own generates a review and prompts me with it, but I can absolutely just request an arbitrary one to do anything that I want it to do. Um, yeah, that it's really nice to be able to just see like show me every chart in the app. Okay. Rachel asks about what about prop type and JS documentation? She built a linter for it, but wondering if there's a way to have it work with Storybook skills to self-heal missing prop types. Hmm.
Could you? I almost wonder if you could build that into the test Storybook test somehow, like as a test provider.
I think I remember seeing an add-on for this actually, like this week or so. I'll check.
Um, um, Marion, I'm just going to demo creating an arbitrary review because it's definitely cool enough. Um, any ideas what I should look at here?
We're in meal drop.
Show me
Yeah.
every illustration in the app. You think that's enough, or do I need to mention a review? Show me a review of.
Try it. I don't know if I don't know if a review is necessary or Storybook. I'm always curious.
Yep. We're learning right along with you.
Obviously, the more explicit you are, so if you're prompting like this and you want to guarantee it, you would say like open a Storybook review or something like that.
Right. Oh, Rachel, you built that oversight add-on. That's been focus of a lot of discussion internally. Very, very cool. Um, while this agent is doing its thing, I see a question from Ryan. With auto-generated docs, is there a way to enable two-way synchronization? For example, if I change something on the canvas, can the generated code and args update automatically to reflect those changes? Um, isn't that the way it works by default? Don't the code snippets automatically reflect? I guess it depends on change something on the canvas. I'm not sure what that would mean. Like you can change controls, and that for sure updates the code snippet, but
Right. Are you talking about changing something using like the IDE browser and like updating some copy or something?
Sounds to me like it's a save story. Like you change some controls and you want to update the story to have those settings,
hmm.
which we have as a feature in the controls panel. You can save story.
Right. So here's an example of what you might get if you ask for it to find some stuff for you.
Yeah. So it found some illustrations, including the logo. One neat thing I've seen it do is if it's really important that something stays the same and doesn't change, um, usually on the last collection here, it'll include those. I'd be like, look, I didn't touch these, just like you told me to. I appreciate that touch. Or like I had to add like a variant of a button, and it gave me other variants that didn't change just so I could like see them side by side and like make sure they're like of a kind. I don't know. It does a remarkably good job of knowing what I should care about. Stop sharing my screen again.
All right. While we're at this awkward pause, I've been working on some side projects, and on those side projects, I've been playing heavily with AI generated stuff, including building out some design systems and things like that. Somebody earlier was asking about starting without a design system and then migrating to that, and that's kind of, I think, going to be a very common workflow if you're not using a set of tools that already start with a design system. Uh, and this review add-on and some of the other tools we baked in have been just absolutely super helpful in being able to do that, migrate and like find edge cases. So on one side project, I'm helping some friends build out basically like a competition site website that they started. Like they vibe coded this huge application thing. Did not have a design system. Everything is Tailwind and bespoke defined buttons on every page, things like that. And migrating that using Storybook has been really helpful. So basically, the first thing I did was have a way to sort of review these without having to spin up the whole app and all that stuff, and then rapidly iterate on it. It's been really useful for that kind of thing. So there's a plugin. Where's Claude to check it locally in Storybook?
Yeah. Yeah, we can just answer that here. So
Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
asks, is there a way to get the agent to check for accessibility things? And yes, I don't know that I think it just kind of glossed over it.
You can get it to check for those.
Here we go.
Getting
So
it to check. Oh, go ahead.
all 13 relevant story tests pass, including accessibility. Um, so it'll by default also check accessibility when it runs these story tests, but it depends on a couple things. So of course, accessibility depends on the accessibility add-on in your storybook, but to run tests at all, you have to have the vtest add-on. Um, you'll know if you have that if you have this here to run component tests. So when you do that, this is, in my opinion, one of the coolest things we've ever built. So it transforms your stories into vtest tests using a Vite plugin, and then runs those vtest tests using vtest behind the scenes for you, and then reports the results right here in the sidebar. And if there were any errors, I could filter by those, so I only see the error stories. That reminds me, I don't think I ever demoed that, but to get back to your storybook, when you're in a review, you can click this button here, and there's your full storybook. And then when there's a review active, you can get to it right here in the top of
Kyle,
the
we can't
sidebar.
see your screen.
Share your screen.
Oh my goodness. So sorry.
Happens every time.
Might be a first for me. Glad to have that over with. Okay. So as I was saying, we've got our review here. If I wanted to go to the full storybook, I can exit the review and get to the storybook. This is where I could use my filters to see only new and modified things, for example. So this gives me the full list of every story that is new and modified. And then the vtest add-on that I was mentioning, we have the test widget down here. If you can see this and run your component test, then you have the vtest add-on, and that's what the agent uses to run its tests. Okay.
Somebody asked a question about these review page variant. So these review pages are just regular storybook pages, is the question, and that's not the case. These are very temporary. These are ephemeral. They're not storybook pages. They don't create a new document anywhere, and they're not committed anywhere. It's primarily an ephemeral view for you to review some stuff. Would you want them to be permanent or committable?
Fact,
I don't know.
Yeah. I'm going to stop my dev server here. So like pretend this was a session and I like just got back to it. It's like, okay, great. Let's see what it did. Well, you can't see it, but that tried to open in a browser, but it didn't work because Storybook's not running. And so you can say, show me that review again. Because the agent has to generate it and then like pass a payload to Storybook. That's the only way that all works. So it's going to discover, hey, Storybook isn't running.
I like your idea, Rachel. I do think that would be kind of a useful tool for like PRs. Like you could have Storybook spin up or an agent spin up this kind of thing for somebody to click on in your PR. That'd be kind of handy.
We have prototyped that.
Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah.
There we go. So yeah, obviously a little clunky there. So yeah, we're exploring what kind of workflows would be appropriate, and how we can make it less ephemeral but not be in your way. Just kind of a hard balance to strike.
Yeah, this is why it's partly like it's still in the experimental realm. Like we know it's useful. We don't know if it's in the best state to to move beyond experimental yet. There's lots of iteration that can happen. So your feedback's really helpful. Your ideas are really helpful and can help shape it.
Absolutely. It's also a question of shaping the project work that we did. Like we can only do so much work in like the schedule that we have. And so we definitely talked about, okay, could we like publish this in your make it part of your static storybook and show it that way? We could do all those things. We just didn't get to it. And we're also not quite sure what would it look like if we did, right? Because it's one thing to just like throw the feature in there, but then like there needs to be like a workflow around it, right? It's not like, oh, we could build anything, but if no one's going to use it because it doesn't really work in a useful workflow, then why build it? And so that's what we're always trying to figure out is like, what's the bigger picture here? Uh,
Harry, can you clarify, will the agentic review work with the MCP server as well?
well, yes. I mean, Agentic Review is the MCP server.
Okay,
Uh,
okay, sure.
so you need the MCP server to be able to use Agentic Review.
All right, all
Because
right.
so I mean, in a nutshell, what it does, it uses the change detection, which is also
Hmm.
something we expose over MCP to figure out, okay, what's changed in your storybook in terms of like a bunch uh the entire tree of the entire graph of stories, and then it uses that information to show you like a review of stuff that's relevant, right? So it actually parses like the graph of components. But that all very much ties into MCP because it's using MCP to get the agent to give the agent the ability to push the review because the agent is generating that review page essentially and pushing it to Storybook. Okay, so it's giving Storybook a set of collections with the summary text and all that stuff, and then Storybook has like a nice UI around it to show it.
Yes. Okay. So I did want to show like the plugins. I showed you how to add that. Codex has a very similar sort of experience. The main thing you need to know is that storybook.js/MCP is where the marketplace is. And then for the agentic review, because it's experimental, you do have to turn that on with a feature flag. And so here's how you do that in your main.ts file. Okay. Michael, I think
Oh,
you
we
might
have,
be a good one to answer Kevin's question.
I was just thinking about it. So, for design systems shared across multiple projects, do we have experience and guidance around using Storybook MCP alongside some kind of agentic design system like design system documentation spec or Google's design.md? We've played with it and we're going to be playing with it very much. We're going deeper on this kind of thing very shortly, but I don't have any. Uh, I don't have a ton of experience with this exact combination of things. I've used within our own design systems a design spec that's very similar to what you're talking about, but alongside the MCP, not so much. And I don't know yet is the answer. I don't know what recommendations to make. I know they play nicely, and that
Yeah.
from folks I know at various larger organizations with some pretty amazing design systems. They're doing exactly what you described, and they're using either Storybook's MCP or Storybook in general for documentation in conjunction with these agentic design system documents. I don't know what else to call them.
Yeah. I would think they'd be quite complementary because a design system is way more than the components. Like it's usage guidelines, it's typography, it's all kinds of decisions that aren't necessarily well expressed within your storybook. Like, yeah, for a component and its usage and its types and like story, absolutely storybook for that. But maybe not storybook for things like uh, tone of voice, for example. Like, I think another tool would be perfect for that and used in conjunction. It could be really good.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can use it for as much documentation as you want. I've been going heavy with it and experimenting with and without well documented components, things like that, and the level of documentation I put in the components. I've been playing a lot with in terms of fidelity. And if you're working with flagship models, the things I've been finding, like the usage section in your documentation, right, where you would normally say like, use a button for this, but not this. Much of this is already in the flagships model
Yeah.
for the latest flagships. So you don't have to document that as much. You just need to document sort of the surprise things and just like
Hmm.
some subtle overviews, almost like the skills description. Like when you're writing like agent skills, the descriptions kind of the key is just like just enough. And then you add anything else that's truly valuable. You don't need to make these huge skills for things that the agent's already going to know. But I think documentation with the code is the way to go as much as you get away with. And like you're saying, Kyle, some things make sense elsewhere. Like your voice and tone might make sense in Notion or someplace where your editors or editing team or marketing teams can get to it and edit it easily. So
Yep. Yep.
you could do it in Storybook, but that's probably not the best place for ease of access.
Yeah.
Zero height for documentation. Yeah, Impeccable works great with Storybook. Zero height's working. Like, there's a lot of really good things you can do.
Michael points out
Uh,
that for UX writing, they put it in a like foundations folder and use MDX. I'm assuming within Storybook. And yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Um, that MDX kind of escape hatch allows you to put anything you want inside your Storybook. And
Yeah.
we will, by the way, we'll provide the agent access to those MDX documents, just like we do their stories and various things. So,
Claude Design. I don't have an answer for you on the Claude Design thing yet because Claude Design, I, I, I think things mostly just work. We've tried a few things with it, but we haven't gone deep. So that's just a short answer. Like you can drop
thank,
your
thank
design
you.
system into it, like the repo for it, into Claude Design, and it'll pick up a bunch of stuff.
I think Hert dropped a great answer, which
Oh
I'm just
yeah,
going to
yeah.
read out loud. um, Tools like Claude Design or V0, they're great for greenfield UI development and prototyping. Storybook and like these tools that we're showing, they really shine when you're using production UI and you want to maintain long term. That said,
Yeah, we're
we do have some internal prototypes of how we can also, maybe this is what Hert was going to say.
I was gonna say, like, we're here for the folks who already have UI to
Yeah, yeah,
maintain and build out over time, right? We realize that not everyone's building a greenfield thing. I mean, most people aren't, let's be real. And we're here to help you make sure that you don't break your UI over time, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like it's maintainable, right? Even if you have a very big system already.
yeah. What I was going to say is for those more like exploratory types of tasks, we've kind of built out a prototype that uses that review UI. So like you're seeing multiple stories on a grid, but it's the same story and different variations of it. And so
Yep.
like if you asked it to make a button, it might give you 5 different buttons to choose from. And so we're trying to figure out how Storybook could help with that part of the process as well, not just the end review.
I wrote a whole pitch for it. Um, I would love to go that direction as well, right? So like, oh, I want to build a shopping cart. Give me 5 variants, right? Uh, Storybook can help you with that and show them in a nice way and like allow you to play around with the 5 variants, right? So we're building building blocks here as well, right? So this review page screen is something that you might see get used for other purposes as well. Maybe not in this form, but some way or form.
Nice, Steve. That's good. That's clever.
Um, we are just about at time. If you have any burning questions, now's the time.
You have 1 minute.
That's a good
What
one.
would you like to see next? Like what would you like to see us? Oh, you could direct our roadmap. You have 1 minute. Convince us.
The CLI.
CLI.
Or do you mean the chromatic one? Like the public API?
The API
Or the new Storybook CLI? I don't know.
for other frameworks.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What framework exactly?
Um, yeah, we're still nailing down exactly which frameworks we're going to commit to. Angular is very high on the list
Definitely.
because we've gotten a
Vue.
lot of people asking for that. So yes, we always record these. If you've registered, we'll send an email. Let's see. I
Yeah.
saw one more. Oh, how successful are you at getting agents to reuse components versus writing from scratch? I would argue the most successful. I think that's the best thing that these tools do is yeah, get reuse the components that you already have. Will there be a major update to the Vite dependency? We are going to do Storybook 11 this fall, and that's when we'll do like dependency updates like that. That could be a breaking change. Mm.
You should come with a list of features. You should always come with a list of features.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is your chance to be heard. Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much for such an engaging session. Asking such great questions. Appreciate your support. Always happy to have you join us. And thank you to Michael and Gert for joining.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care.